I'm Portia Young. Welcome to the Future of Manufacturing Town Hall, a 1-hour special here on Milwaukee PBS, produced in partnership with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This program is coming to you from Milwaukee Area Technical College's Cooley Auditorium in the heart of downtown Milwaukee. We have invited the community here as we talk about a resurgence in U.S. manufacturing and the urgent need to recruit and educate the workforce it requires. For the next hour, we will focus on the opportunities for Wisconsin to expand its modern manufacturing base and some of the obstacles getting in the way. We'll ask our panelists about the demographic cliff our current workforce will soon face, the skills gap, and how this enormous challenge can be met. And we'll extend the conversation to our audience here at MATC, opening the floor for them to ask their questions. Before we introduce our panelists, let's first hear from Microsoft President Brad Smith, who grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin. Earlier this year, Microsoft announced a historic $3.3 billion investment to develop an AI data center in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. As you'll hear, he's optimistic that the state's workforce will be ready to meet the moment.
One of the biggest challenges right now that I see, both for Microsoft and more broadly, is that employers need to hire more people. They actually need to find more people. They especially need more people with the right skills. So if Wisconsin can become a place that is using what I think is a world-class educational system, whether you're talking about the University of Wisconsin in Madison or Milwaukee or Green Bay or elsewhere, or MATC or the other community colleges, harness that power, make sure that people have access to the skills, market what is great about Wisconsin to the country and the world. The good news is that Wisconsin is such a great place for people to live and work. And as somebody who was born and grew up in the state, obviously it went through a number of decades when jobs were declining. As jobs grow, people will follow. You just have to get the word out. I think the number one gap in the country today is really around helping to skill the workforce. Now, the private sector is going to, I believe, have to invest more ourselves in on-the-job training and other skilling programs. I think that public spending needs to focus on two things in particular. One, make sure there's the faculty in these institutions that are trained and have good jobs so they stick with them. And two, make sure there's the kind of financial aid, the scholarship money, so that people can go to school, can go to a community college. I think one thing that we're all gonna need is to learn a little bit about how to use AI. Now, on a manufacturing floor, I would say virtually every manufacturer, two tasks that are really important are maintenance of the machinery and equipment and quality control. And then you realize the best time to fix a machine is before it breaks. And you have artificial intelligence with the right kinds of sensors that are increasingly capable of analyzing and predicting when something is going to need to be, say, replaced in a part so that the machine doesn't break. So when you put all of this together, what you realize is that it's not necessarily the case that a job's going to go away at all, but the bundle of tasks will change. And in order to excel in the job of the future, you're going to need to go acquire the skills that become part of that job. My advice to any young person is invest in yourself. Invest in your education. It remains the investment that will lead to the highest return economically of your lifetime. That is true in 2024, just as it was true in 1924 and 50 years ago in 1974. Work hard. Pour yourself into the opportunity to succeed.
Brad Smith's words about attracting people to this re-emerging industry sets the tone for our discussion. So we turn now to our panel and bring them into our conversation. We have accomplished and experienced guests on our stage who are on the front lines of manufacturing here in Wisconsin. Immediately next to me is Barney Bannon, an instructor of electronics and engineering and technology here at METC. He's a graduate of the Milwaukee School of Engineering, which is nearby, and is another important player in this space. Next, we have Megan Zanukakis, the CEO of Sussex IM. And IM stands for Injection Molding. Her family-owned business was featured in reporting by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and Milwaukee PBS about how reshoring has brought back products from China. Next, we have Sachin Shivaram, CEO of Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry in Manitowoc. In November of 2023, he was named chairman of Governor Tony Evers' Council on Workforce Investment. He also studied history and literature at Harvard. And joining us from Cleveland, Ohio is Alia Brown. Alia is a project engineer for Transportation Resource Associates. She's a community college instructor and also founded Build Sessions Cleveland, a mentorship initiative for college-bound STEM students from underrepresented communities. And finally, we have Kevin Murch, the Midwest Union representative for the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. He is the founder and the former co-host of The Solidarity Effect, a radio show based in Fargo, North Dakota that focuses on working class and labor issues. Thank you so much for joining our discussion. Thank you for being here. And we're gonna start with that demographic cliff that we talked about that we're facing in just a few years. There will be more manufacturing jobs than people in the available workforce. And the latest Wisconsin manufacturing report shows 81% of the surveyed manufacturing executives across the state said that it was difficult to find qualified workers for new or open positions. So I'd like to start by asking all of you, have you seen this demographic cliff and in your own work environments and whether it keeps you up at night? Okay, we'll start with Sachin for this question.
Well, it doesn't keep me up at night, but it is certainly an existential concern for us. You know, we had actually a moment where we could see exactly the demographic cliff that we're talking about. So every year we bring back our retirees for a breakfast and a tour of our plant on the Thursday before Labor Day. So just a month ago, we had the breakfast, and you know we have a room full of retirees. Actually, we had about 60 people come, and the collective 2,100 years of experience. And when they walked out on the floor, they said, "Wow, like." People look a lot different than they used to, you know. We were built by, a generation of young men, mostly white men, who came and, built our factory, and a lot of them retired. And now we're searching for different pockets of labor. And it was really clear, there's a clear change in who lives in Wisconsin. And, we know the population is decreasing. And so we're relying more and more on, on immigrants to come in and fill this demographic cliff. But if it were not for that, it would be very difficult. So yeah, this is a real concern.
Megan?
Yes, so we have 250 employees at our company. And since 2020, we have had over 30 retirements, and we have 50 people in our 25-year club. So people that have worked at our company for over 25 years. And that to me is staggering because those people that have been with us for 25 years, they're going to retire soon too. And that's basically, almost half of our company that will turn over. So we have seen this shift in these experienced workers leaving the workforce, and there's a gap between the tribal knowledge that they had and the people that are left that don't necessarily have those skills yet.
Kevin?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern in the industry that I come out of, manufacturing. I worked at the Case New Holland tractor facility in Fargo, North Dakota, and we've seen that years ago that there was going to be eventually this proverbial cliff that we've fallen off of as of right now, and it is a definite concern not only to obviously the business owners but also of the labor organizations too, because there is a lot of knowledge that is retiring and moving out of the workforce, and in essence it leaves a gap within the industry as a whole. And if you look at like the security of the United States and what we need to do to bring this manufacturing back, we're looking at all different kinds of avenues to work with our companies that we represent to create apprenticeship programs and incentives to bring people into those facilities And hopefully we can still capture some of that carnal knowledge that's leaving, because it is a very significant threat to not only just Wisconsin, but the country as a whole. And we're willing to do what we can to
And
help.
Alia, you're on the kind of that pipeline end. So how are you experiencing that demographic cliff?
Yeah, so being on the pipeline and being in the pipeline, but also wanting to heavily influence it with my previous 13 years of experience in the manufacturing space, I've definitely seen the shift in seeing the more experienced workforce exit without being able to transfer that knowledge, and the younger generation, including myself, trying to grasp that knowledge as fast as possible. But there's so many things that just can't be taught, and being in the field proverbially is the best teacher. So having to work with so many of the different manufacturers collectively, as well as the nonprofit organizations and the local colleges, to make sure that we're able to tie together education and industry and see what we can push from the government standpoint is something that we've had to be very creative about, and we have to continue to be the trailblazers when it comes to that.
And Barney, the demographic cliff for the students that you teach.
Well, on their side, it's all pain, but on the student side, it's a good thing, because for them, it's opportunity, it's rising salaries because of demand that can't be met, and it's really a chance for them to start a career in an environment where, rising tide is lifting all boats. So for the students, it's all good news. I mean, the salaries have grown really a lot. I recently saw an ad for employment, and it was listing that for someone coming out of our program with a 2-year associate degree in electrical engineering technology and 2 years experience, they were offering up to $120,000, which is amazing to me. I mean, I didn't see salaries like that previous, but they're really going up. So from the student end, it's all good. Hopefully we'll be able to help provide more and more students to fill the pipeline that they need.
Well then, that leads to the next question. You have the students now, but demographics are the future really, and where are we going to get the workforce that we need? Again, more jobs than there will people with declining birth rates in this nation. So where are we gonna do it, and what's the impact if these jobs go unfilled in Wisconsin? So I'll start with you, Megan.
So it's funny you asked that question, because we were actually talking about it beforehand. It's going there. So the jobs are here, the people are here, but we need more people to come into Wisconsin, right? And that is through immigration, right? So we need the government to come up with a smart, simple immigration plan that gets the right people with the right skill sets into our country that want to learn and want to grow with our companies. That's really where it's going to come from.
Sachin?
Yeah, well, I already mentioned immigration, and I wholeheartedly agree with Megan. That's a clear part of the solution. I'd add on 2 other things. One is our company participates in the Regional Economic Development Agency for our region of Wisconsin, which is called the New North. And one of the main activities of what we do is to help sell the value proposition of our state. I mean, low cost of living, great schools, beautiful environment, friendly people, the best people. So we sell those things, and hopefully we can get people to move here from within the country. But the third thing I'd say, or the second thing I'd say, is productivity. We might not be able to get the bodies, but each person can be more productive than what we had in the past, and we certainly see that today. I mean, our company is putting out more castings, which is what we make. We make aluminum castings, more castings today than we did 50 years ago, with probably 1/10 of the people. And so I think continuing to invest in education so that our people can be more productive, and if we don't have the bodies, at least people can do more than what people used to do in the past.
And Kevin, from a Midwest standpoint, you're up.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with a lot of that, and I'd also add that the collective bargaining aspect that workers have and are available to tap into, and if we can promote and understand that if there's a lot of workers out there that may not have an understanding of where they want to go, and collective bargaining gives them an opportunity to collectively come together and negotiate with the employers to provide the security and the stability and the economic basis for long-term employment, and that's what we do in the IAM, is to try to promote that within the industry and the general public. And I think it's a very, very important component moving forward in this country to enhance collective bargaining on all levels.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go to the next question, because we do want to talk about strategies, and people are watching at home and they want to know, what strategies have you used, Barney, to find students, and what strategies have you used to find workers? So,
Well, I think there's really two main areas where our students come from. They come from high school, so it's post-secondary education, and in that we need to do a better job, quite frankly, of reaching out to the K-12 student population and let them know about the types of programs we have here, and let them know that they're interesting fields to go into and well-paying, and that they should consider it. And it's a good field to go into. It's not the kind of work that's tedious. Instead, it's always interesting and different and problem-solving, and it makes a difference. And it's you can really, see the fruits of your efforts. And that's very rewarding. So I think we need to do a better job of outreaching and telling people about the type of work that's available here. And I think the other thing is that employers need to sign up to developing their own workforce, because of the demographic change, and because really the last baby boomers are pretty much retiring now. I know, because I'm on the tail end of that. And
Don't leave yet.
Yes. So, I mean, they're gone, right? They're not coming back, and there just isn't enough people, quite frankly. And you're going to, without those technical skills that people are looking for, and employers need to embrace the same concept in manufacturing that the trades have done forever, which is they hire someone, and then they put them, typically a lot of times, through apprenticeship programs, which are great, but you don't have to have a formal apprenticeship program. You basically hire that person, make sure they're right for you, and then you need to tell them, well, and you're going to school.
Yep.
And that way they can develop, because you need that technical background.
Ali is nodding her head, because that was your story, correct? And that's the work you do.
Yes, very similar to my story. So I actually started my career at Rockwell Automation in high school, went into just a traditional summer internship program, but then I ended up staying throughout the school year, and I stayed until I graduated from Cleveland State with my bachelor's degree, and in turn, ended up paying for my master's. However, you pretty much hit the nail on the head, Barney, with being able to reach out to that K-12, because if you start at the post-secondary level, it's already too late. So there is an event that Rockwell puts on along with the Great Lakes Science Center in Cleveland called Manufacturing Day, and there was also one up here last year with Discovery World in Milwaukee, and the whole point is for local manufacturers to come together and be able to share the joys of manufacturing to the younger generation. So being able to bring interactive activities, having their own pseudo job fairs, to be able to give the employees a chance to give back to the community, educate that younger workforce on what type of jobs are attainable for them, and for them to be able to see that representation. And when you spoke about the employers investing in their employees, again, you're correct. The subject of this town hall is the future of manufacturing. Every company knows what their vision is, what their true north is going to be for the next 5, 10 to 20 years. So why not think ahead on what type of technology you want to implement in your facilities, what skills you want your workforce to be able to obtain, and just upskill them in that. And that's where you get the bodies from.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to our next segment, because even if we have enough people for all the manufacturing jobs forecasted to be available over the next decade, would those people then have the right skills to step into what is increasingly a more automated and tech-oriented industry? Let's hear from some local businesses executives about that skills gap.
15, 20 years ago, you had a number of people that were able to work in manufacturing, but they didn't have the skills to fill in the jobs. And now, as the baby boomers have checked out of the workforce, so many of the baby boomers have, we just have a lack of people. It's just demographics. And instead of just using your hands to assemble things, you need to be able to evaluate if the process is working right. You need to be able to troubleshoot. You need to be able to program. You need to be able to solve problems. So those are big skills that the school district does a pretty good job of educating on, and then when you get into a manufacturing setting, you can really apply them.
Today, I think the skills gap is more in terms of how do you take the theory that you're learning in school and apply it in the real world. And that's where the gap is. So the gap is, yes, I understand theoretically how this is supposed to work, but I don't know how to put it in practice because I've never done it. And we hire a lot of summer interns, youth apprentices, and the thing that I ask them is, what is the number one biggest takeaway from your time here? And they say, the stuff that I learned, I now see how it applies. I now understand what that means. I didn't before. So to me, that's the gap.
I think manufacturing is a great career space for everybody from PhD level computer science majors to kids that would rather work with their hands and want to get an associate's degree. I mean, it's probably the hardest role for us to fill today is technicians, right? People that can put robotic assembly lines together, can do some of the basic programming, can maintain them. Those are really high-paying jobs. They don't necessarily require 4-year degrees, and they give you the capacity to, make some money, have a great career, and then hopefully stack, credentials and learning throughout your career, and you can really, have a pretty exciting career trajectory over many years in advanced manufacturing.
The skills gap is more than just a buzzword. Tech and automation have far outpaced the supply of high-skilled labor. And according to a recent report, it could lead to as many as 2.1 million unfilled jobs across the U.S. by 2030. So let's talk about the skills gap a little bit more. So Megan, we'll start with you for this question, but the entire panel can answer. What are the technical skills, the technology skills that the manufacturing workforce needs today and in the future? What are those specific skills?
Yeah, so those skills are really kind of what Barney mentioned before. Electrical engineering is huge. PLC programming, technicians, we have injection molding machines, so injection molding technicians, maintenance technicians, those are really the skills that we have a gap in our organization, and what we reach out to our local technical college to help us in filling those gaps.
Sachin?
Yeah, I'd add on to that by saying that not only are these the skills, we see the same in our business, but we need a better method of integrating education into the career path of our people, so that it's not just I'm going to go to MATC and get my associate's degree in this, and then I'm going to come back and continue the rest of my degree and my career. But how do we just integrate it into a career path, and then how do we enable workers to tell the rest of the world, this is what I know? I think some sort of micro-credentialing or something so that they can tell people, okay, I know now how to do this. I'm ready to move on to the next step and continuing to upskill myself. And so 100% agree. These are the exact skills that not just our company, your company, but so many manufacturing companies I see. And then, integrating education into that is going to be critical.
Kevin, let's go a little bit further.
Yeah, so I agree. It's an absolute integration of on-the-job sets, right? It's not just education, but it's actual on-hands training and work experience in the manufacturing facilities. And we've got a great example in Chicago, Illinois, in Local Lodge 701. We have a training center that is specifically designed for teaching people auto mechanics, and the car dealerships down there work hand in hand with Local 701 for a pipeline for workers to go through that training program and go directly into jobs that are at the dealerships, and that can be replicated in manufacturing as well. And we look forward to doing that. But you're absolutely right. We need to be able to have the on-the-job skills that people can say, "Hey, listen, I came to the aluminum foundry and I learned how to be a machinist," and those are very highly technical skills, along with supplementing through MATC some education that could be integrated in a collective bargaining agreement. That is the basis of some economic stability that I think we should really be proud of and brag about.
Alia, how are you helping young people find those skills that they need, or what do you suggest to them?
So I have worked with the local community college, Cuyahoga Community College back in Cleveland, and I helped to develop a micro-credential certificate that kind of strips away some of those classes that someone would normally take at Tri-C, but in turn they're getting trained on that in the job. So back to what you were saying, Sachin, with that micro-credentialing, capitalizing off of what the company already offers and just saying, all right, these are the formal in-classroom things that you need to learn, because yes, you can learn DC and AC circuits on the job, but having that be along somebody that's already overworked might not be the value add that employers always think that it is. So just being able to meet the workers where they are is the biggest thing. And in addition to all of these skills and specific degrees or certificates that somebody needs, just critical thinking is something that we need to just continue to tie together. Being able to bring in people that are curious, that aren't afraid to ask questions, but also are not afraid to mess up and learn when they mess up is what all of our manufacturers need.
So young people that actually talk on the phone instead of just texting on the
Exactly.
phone. Okay. So Barney, what are some of your most successful students? What skills do they have?
Well, in our program, electrical engineering technology, I mean, there's a lot to learn, quite frankly. I mean, and it doesn't come in an instant. And I know the internet is great, but the reality is it takes a certain amount of dedicated attention to subjects that are in depth to try to master them. And it's hard to do on your own. And I think it's kind of hard to do in a company environment too. You need to sort of have a base knowledge to really be productive in a company environment and a way to apply that. And there's plenty to learn once you get into a particular company's environment about all the ways they do things and applying these concepts. And an example that was mentioned, you know, you're looking for PLC programmers. And we teach one of our, in our program, we teach PLC programming. And it's great, and we learn the fundamentals of PLCs, and it's more than that. It's really it's an introduction to the controls world as well, which is kind of a larger subject of where PLCs are fitting into. But I guess the point is like when they come out of the program, it's not like, oh, they know everything and there's nothing to learn. No, it could take them 6 months at least to come up to speed to all, to that company's particular PLC programming environment. So there's tons to learn yet, but without that base knowledge, it's really hard, I think, to launch yourself. And I think that's really the value of, of an associated degree, or an engineering degree to support that.
So Sachin, what is the impact of the skills gap? What impacts do you see at your company?
Quite simply, we can't do what we want to do. I mean, we, for instance, this week we're working on a very complicated part that one of our customers who makes high-end medical equipment is coming out with a robot that does surgery. And very specific parts that we need to make, and we're running up against walls because we don't have enough people who have the types of skills, to work on the designs, to actually run the machines. And so we're beholden to, a small pool of people that have the skills that we need. And so that project is getting delayed and delayed and delayed, and our customers getting frustrated. So we're living the skills gap.
Megan?
It's similar for us, right? So we have a lot of automation equipment that was designed and built many years ago, and the person who necessarily designed and built that retired. And now we have people that are working on that equipment, and they don't know the little ins and outs, the tribal knowledge, and it leads to waste. It leads to scrap on our plant floor, and it directly affects our bottom line. So we have to upskill those people to try and get them the skills so we don't have so much waste in our plant.
So Barney, this question is specifically for you. In the multi-part series that Rick Barrett produced for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, he quotes Harry Moser of saying this, of the reshoring initiative, saying, quote, "The largest barrier to having a stronger workforce is recruiting enough trainees. A massive shift in resources is needed from liberal arts college degrees to engineering and apprenticeship programs." Barney, do you agree with that?
Well, I do believe that more people should consider it. I mean, it's almost implying we need to get rid of liberal arts. I don't believe in that. And I mean, that certainly has a role to play. And we do have a little bit of a flavor of liberal arts in our program as well. But given that, yes, I think there needs to be more emphasis for sure on this. I mean, they're talking about trying to find people to do this. These are great jobs, and they're highly skilled, and they grow. It's not like you come out of this program and, okay, here you're pigeonholed. This is your life. No, this is a starting point. It's a place to develop expertise and learn about that whole industry, and then use that as a platform to go to the next stage. I mean, where do you think the managers and supervisors and technical salespeople are going to come from? Ideally, they come from, you know, people that know everything about your company that played a role in it. And the other thing that I think that we haven't talked about, but just like when you come out of a program like this, you also have reasoning skills and logic skills that you would not have as developed as strongly. And those directly benefit you, whatever you do in the company, you know, and in whatever business, you know, things that you do beyond just the technical or in people skills.
Alia, do you agree with that statement? More engineering, less liberal art?
So I am a very strong reader. I'm reading a couple books now, so I am I'm much not on the side of getting rid of liberal arts. However, we have to be able to meet these individuals where they are. So if somebody has a strong liberal arts background, why not say, okay, you can use these skills in my manufacturing facility and still be just as successful as somebody that's graduated with a traditional engineering degree. I've met people that have gigantic sewing rooms, and because they're so good at sewing, they are now solder instructors. So those skills are easily transferable. We just have to be able to communicate what can be just as effective within this workforce.
So,
You know, I studied the liberal arts in college. As you noted in my intro, I got a degree in history and literature, and there's nothing more liberal arts than that. And I wanted to come back to actually a comment you made about basic skills. And, you know, strangely, the more complex our work environments get, almost the simpler our needs are. You know, if people can effectively read and write and communicate and express what they know, we can kind of take care of the rest. We can, you know, and so I'm a big fan of the liberal arts. And I hope people continue to study that, and then I hope they come to work for us. So, good point.
okay, so Kevin, from your perspective, last question in this segment, what could organized labor do what could they do a better job in attracting people to careers in manufacturing?
I think part of it is to change the narrative in the country and in Wisconsin and get people to believe and understand that the workers in this country, especially the workers that are working for all these companies, whether they're union or non-union, they have a vested interest in the success of the company. And through collective bargaining and securing their contracts, securing their economic, advantage through wages and benefits, it will enhance them greatly. And I think creating the narrative and changing the narrative that we're not enemies, we're partners. Okay, we want to partner with companies, and we want to be part of that team, and encouraging people to be part of something larger than themselves, right? There's a lot of young workers in the world today that are looking for purpose. The purpose is with the IEM and with organized labor, partnering with companies like Aluminum Foundry and others to enhance those critical thinking skills, because that is absolutely critical going forward, I think. So that's how we do it.
All right. Well, now that we have spent some time dissecting this problem, let's pivot to a more solutions-based conversation about how we're going to meet the demand for all of these jobs. Let's hear from industry leaders as they make a call for action.
We need to continue to do whatever we can as industry and as educators and as individuals to support the ongoing manufacturing. And that means we have to have good education, and we have to have young people who are interested in making stuff. We have to do technology adoption, because if we don't adopt technology, we will fall behind and we will not be competitive in the manufacturing market. And we have to have industry that is willing to support education and educators, and that are willing to take on new people at the novice stage and teach them how to become good manufacturers.
You got to get parents and educators to realize that manufacturing jobs are great jobs. So we got to get the mindset changed. Make them realize that if you graduate from high school, you go to technical school, and you end up in a place like this, it's awesome work. It's not something that you're settling for something less. It's awesome work. And you're going to make a lot of money right out of high school or right out of technical school, and you're not going to have to spend 4 or 5 years going to college and all the money, all the expense of going to college.
The notion of staying in school full-time after high school, it's great for some people, but That's changing. College is super expensive these days, and the ability to go into the workforce, to make money, to get job experience, and to pursue education at the same time, I think is a great value proposition for a lot of graduating high school kids.
You can begin as an entry-level individual, and you can become, in the manufacturing, a plant-level operations person exceeding 6 figures.
No one here is only one thing. Not a single person has only one unique skill. We cross-train and we create that career progression and that career path, because then they don't have to go someplace else to earn more money or to do something more interesting or to try something that they've never done before. They can do all of that here.
When we're recruiting students, we really try to emphasize the technology-forward aspect of manufacturing in this century in America. It's not dirty, unsafe, dark. It's bright, clean, high-tech, really high value-added stuff.
As you clearly heard from each of those executives, their call to action includes more investment into education, adapting to new technology, and setting up mentorship programs. So, my first question for our panel, if we want Wisconsin to be attractive, to be that magnet for mining and manufacturing, what are some of the important things that local stakeholders can do to create that environment that really fosters that kind of growth that we need here in Wisconsin? And we'll go to Megan first.
So what I would really like to see is more grants or subsidies for formalized training programs. It is a very huge burden on the company when you have to train this many people this quickly to fill that gap. And especially a company like ours that had very low turnover for a very long time, it is a lot of work to train these people, and we want to be able to use outside technical colleges and other companies to help do some of that training for us and take the burden off of our employees who are also doing their regular jobs. So I think if we could have more grants, more subsidies to kind of help take the burden off of our companies for that investment in training, that would be extremely helpful.
Sachin?
Agree with that. And actually, we've been the beneficiary of various state and federal programs. We participated in a new market tax credit that, because we're in a low income census tract, it helped fund our investment. The state of Wisconsin gave us a fast forward grant to build a training center so that we were training our employees on the shop floor. So I think that is great. More of that would be even better. A continuation of the manufacturing tax credit, which is very important to help us keep competitive. I'll say something maybe controversial in that I think more support for our unions would help bring the sort of workforce we need, because it helps keep those jobs attractive. We have 3 locals, including a local of your union, Kevin, at our plant. Great relationships, and they train people and make the job attractive, and then more people are going to come to want to work in those jobs.
Mm-hmm. Kevin?
Yeah, and I would also say that, within our organization, we are very aggressive on the political side of the spectrum, understanding that there's no reason why employers in Wisconsin and across this country should have to suffer onto the burden of the costs of some of these programs when there are mechanisms and programs within the federal government for funding, and not only on the state level but on the federal level, that we should be able to talk to our elected officials and say, listen, this is an investment in Wisconsin. This is an investment in our people. This is an investment in our country. And we need to really focus on that. So we're all in on that, and we appreciate the relationship we have with the aluminum foundry and other companies, and are open for business for everybody else too, because I think that's really the end game here, is to really enhance that. So we're really, on the political side, believe it's very important for us to get that message to our elected officials.
Barney, you're a stakeholder in this. What can Wisconsin do to be that attractive magnet for the future of manufacturing?
Well, something we haven't really addressed, and I think that if you think about traditional communities that maybe aren't always successful, in our economy, I think we need to give them hope and also create another pipeline. And my own opinion is, if you come from a certain background where you are economically disadvantaged, and you have completed your high school diploma, I think the state should pay for 2 years of technical college in certain strategic programs that will help the state progress further. Because these jobs that we're talking about, these technical jobs, like electrical engineering technology, have a disproportionate positive impact. It's like a lever arm that projects aren't, like you mentioned a project for an important customer that wasn't getting done because you were lacking resources. So that can lead into a whole nother area of business. So it's like you don't see the outsized missing piece that you're not going to get to a lot of times. And so we need to make sure that those are not unmet needs. And I think a great idea would be to give these people a path forward that they know that's there for them, instead of thinking, well, I don't know, I can't really afford college, or I don't know what I'm going to do. Now it's like different. Oh, here's a path for me. I don't have to think about it. It's here, and it's mine if I want to take it. And then, by the way, wow, I'm probably going to be successful if I make it through it. I mean, it would be an awesome turnaround, and it would pay for itself many times over in tax revenue from from their lifetime earnings to the state. I think it's a great idea.
And Ali, you have a business that you started to represent underrepresented people in this space. So is what Barney's saying, that's kind of what you do?
Yeah, so that is very similar to the things that I envision and what I've seen slowly start to be accomplished within the Northeast Ohio space. Everything that the panelists have set up here is really just the basis of a true STEM ecosystem, and I think we have to do a better job, and this is just nationwide, of highlighting what the different resources and elements are of that ecosystem and make it more of like a hub and spoke, and all of those spokes are the union reps, there's the industries, the education portion, and being able to push and pull on all of these different variables that we need to capitalize on to make sure the workforce remains strengthened.
All right, so what could schools do a better job to meet the needs of our manufacturers? And I'll go to you, Barney. What can schools do?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I mean, they need to do a better job of making students aware of these great things that are available in the manufacturing and technical space. And just like put it on their radar screen would be like the simple answer.
So what is that gap? Why are they not aware?
I think it's not the buzzword. Is I think the easy word. I mean, 30 years ago it was the buzz. Automation is the buzzword. I mean, that was like the first phase, and we're at a stage now where it's kind of it's out there. Who cares? But I mean, the reality is, maybe the people that were initially excited 30 years ago they're gone, but the people maybe have retired, the baby boomers retired, the equipment did not retire. They need to fill those roles. I mean, that's not, it's not an option to shut down a plant because you're having trouble finding technical people. I mean, it's just not an option. And so these are great positions, and I think it's just not on people's radar screens. It's not the cool, hip thing, I think, but it's an interesting, fulfilling career with a great trajectory. So I just think it needs to be, oh yeah, what about this kind of thing? It just needs to be put back on the radar screen for K through 12.
Do you partner with schools, Megan?
So we do, through the Waukesha County Business Alliance, we participate in a lot of schools to skills tours. So we have middle schoolers and high schoolers come through our plant, 25 to 30 to 50 of them several times throughout the year. And that's kind of how we tell our local community and those kids what we're doing and the types of jobs that they can get. And I do agree with you, Barney. I think that when I was in high school, technical college you didn't go to technical college, right? Your high school pushed you to four-year college. And I do think that's changing, though. I see the local high schools in our area investing more in their tech ed programs and meeting their students where they're at and finding the ones that, like, you guys should work with your hands. This is something you should do, and being more supportive of it. It's a massive shift from where we were.
I think another, if I may, jump in on this, because I think it's really an important component when we look at K through 12, right, and what you're being exposed to at a very young age. A lot of times, school systems are moving away from the vocational classes that were there, like when I went to school, like the welding classes, the small engine repair, shop class. There needs to be a capital investment by government to say, hey, we need to refund these programs for these school systems to make it attractive to the students where they're at. We have to go to where they're at. That's in school. Well, in order to do that, we need to make sure that we pressure our elected politicians and to fund these programs for school systems and say, hey, put the welding class back in high school.
Can I add something really quickly? So I am on a technical advisory committee for a couple of Cleveland area high schools where they do have welding classes.
Nice.
They do have the shop classes. They're doing automotive and even putting on trade shows to try to show students all of these different avenues. And to your point, Rodney, just being able to have a little bit more open-mindedness when it comes to opening their doors to these industry professionals, because in order to have a technical advisory committee, you have to have people in the industry that actually know what they're talking about. So I've seen where there's a little tension where somebody in the industry may feel that a classroom should be run one way where the teacher is still just in that traditional mindset. So I think we might have to just kind of coax a little bit with the help of the government to say, hey, if we want this, demographic or these students to be successful in this area, maybe we need to just, try to butter the lines a little bit more.
Yeah. And our final question for this segment goes to you, Sachin. How can manufacturers do a better job to maybe meet the lifestyle needs of their employees? Things like childcare, and Sachin, your company just took that step.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked me this question, because this is something we're incredibly passionate about. At our company, we talk about the sustainability of work. We need to make the job sustainable for families, two working spouses, and all sorts of needs. And so we offer English classes, for instance, for immigrants if they don't speak English, and converse. We have people who are bilingual, so I think that helps people's lifestyle. Flexible shift work, this is something that manufacturing has long struggled with, which is, well, everybody's got to start at 6 or 2 or 10, but people have very different needs. And so, working, in fact, last week we had a guy on his first day. He started 2 hours later than his shift was supposed to start, because that's what he needed to do to take his child to childcare. And on childcare, this is something we are super passionate about, really because we're thinking about the experience of the children in our community, but it is also a critical part of working. And so what we do is something simple. We support our employees with $400 a month for any childcare expense they have. And we really are advocating for structural solutions, maybe state funding, things like that. But in the absence of that, we've been supporting our employees through a stipend.
All right. So we would like to invite the community into our conversation. If anybody in the audience has a question for our panel, feel free, step up to the microphone on the far aisles. Please state your name, where you're from, and who your question is for. And we have our first question.
My name is Pepin LaChance. I'm from the south side of Milwaukee, and I'm a disabled dad. I've been disabled for about a decade now or so. And the thing I've noticed is that if you're disabled, it's almost impossible to get a patent, because the patents cost more than what you're legally allowed to even have without risking losing your benefits. And so what I'm wondering is if maybe they could use AI and do kind of a public-private partnership to develop an AI that could help work with people to make a patent, bring their dreams to life. If that's something that could be done down the line.
Sachin, what do you think about?
Well, I don't know much about this particular issue, but I would say, if we can do more to encourage entrepreneurship, and you obviously have a skill that is not being taken advantage of by the broader economy. So I think, help for people, especially in dislocated, communities, minorities and women, and people with disabilities, those people who might not have access to capital and things. The more we can do to encourage entrepreneurship among those populations, we'll all be better off. So great question.
Okay, thank you. Our next question.
Yes, hello. I'm Steve Lead with Partners in Hope, a reentry program here in Milwaukee, and I want to get your thoughts and reactions to an untapped workforce pool not yet mentioned tonight, are returning citizens. So those coming out of incarceration, some highly skilled, many unskilled, needing work, looking for opportunities.
All right. Alia.
So wonderful question, and you are correct. We did not tap on that segment of the economy. So there is a program at Magnet back in Northeast Ohio called Access to Manufacturing. And this is a program that does grant access to individuals that are re-entering the workforce or want to enter into the manufacturing workforce. And of course, it always depends on the end employer, what type of offenses they're willing to accept. However, being able to tap into those skills, that discipline, is something that is definitely needed. And I do believe that we have to highlight that a little bit more within the manufacturing sector, because that's, again, more bodies that we can put into the facilities.
space. How do unions address that reentry?
You know, everybody deserves a second chance, right? I mean, and, you know, that's a very interesting question. As far as we're concerned, you know, I mean, workers are workers, right? If the companies are open to the opportunities to give people those chances, we're all in on that, right? I mean, because it's all about the workers' collective economic security, and there are a lot of people coming out of that situation, and there's opportunities here, you know, and if they're willing to put their best foot forward to do what they can to make the company successful, I mean, we're supportive of that.
All right. Our next question.
David Polk, I'm here from, born and raised here in the city of Milwaukee. I wanted to ask a specific question. You all talked about the recruitment of young people, the youth of internship, and of course, youth apprenticeship. And sometimes in that recruitment, the sales job of getting young people into manufacturing is not necessarily on the young person. Sometimes you have to sell the family on getting that young person into manufacturing. So can a few of the panelists speak to how do you talk to the parents about the benefits of a young person going into the manufacturing field to get them to buy into their young person pursuing this occupation?
Yeah, Megan, or
Oh, no, Megan, you go first.
That is a really great question, and actually something I had thought of before, because a lot of those high school students, the reason why they go to four-year college is because that's what their parents want for them, right? So we need to re-educate parents that manufacturing is a great opportunity for anyone, and the amount of different types of careers you could have is endless, right? At our company, you can work your way from an operator on the shop floor to material handling, technician, engineer. There's just so many different paths you can take, and I think that education of parents that your child is going to make something that will help our country, will grow our economy, and could end up on a store shelf. Like, I would go with my dad to Walgreens when I was a kid, and he would show me the cosmetic compacts that he designed, and they were built in Sussex. And I just saw the pride that he had, and I think that if you relay stories like that to parents, they'll understand that your child will have so much pride from what they're doing every day, and you're helping our economy one day at a time.
Ollie, you have to have those conversations with parents?
Yes, so I've gone to many open houses, whether they have been in community spaces or at the high schools, and spoken directly to the parents. Sometimes my mom, who's in the audience here, will come along with me as well. But being able to share my story with me starting at this manufacturing and industrial automation space when I was a teenager, again, just really having those honest conversations with the students, with the parents, being able to give out my personal information and offering to have tours or side conversations or just more of an in-depth conversation on what the type of environment the student will be working in, and also ensuring the parents that the student will be working with me, or I'll at least be able to oversee what they'll be dealing with on a day-to-day basis, has a lot of times been able to sell the parents to let the students come in. And just being personable at the end of the day is the most important thing that I've been successful with.
All right. Thank you very much for your questions, audience. Thank you for those brave enough to step to the microphone. Before we do wrap up our conversation, I do want to have some fun a little bit. I'd love for our panelists, if you had the opportunity to maybe create a campaign slogan or a bumper sticker for U.S. manufacturing, what would that be? And I'll start with Kevin.
No problem. Easy one for me, or for us, and that would be securing your future, union made in the USA.
All right.
And it kind of defines itself, right? We're securing our future with union contracts and collective bargaining.
All right. Alia?
That was very strong.
Thank you.
My bumper sticker would say, thanks to manufacturing. So the car that you're driving in, the clothes that we're wearing, so many different elements of our lives are given to us, and we all have manufacturing to thank for that.
Okay.
Good.
So we got a heads up on this question this morning, and so as I was driving, I have the same drive every day from Green Bay to Manitowoc on I-43, and it's, you know, trucks going by, and they've got equipment on the trucks, and there are people driving to work, and every day I actually go to work thinking, man, like, America is in a hurry. People have places to go, and they're going to, especially in the manufacturing area where we live, people are going and they're going to go build stuff at work. And so I'd say, manufacturing moves America, and it's literally moving us. We're moving stuff, but in a spiritual sense, it also moves me. All of us, we love this industry, and when you walk onto your shop floor, it just fills you with pride, and so moves me in that way just as much as it does physically.
Nice.
Megan?
So like Sachin said, we had a little heads up on this, and I'm not that creative. So I asked ChatGPT what it would be, and I actually did not like any of them. They were terrible. So I did make up my own, and I think that if I had a bumper sticker, it would be, if you buy it here, you should make it here.
Oh.
Nice.
Okay.
I also use ChatGPT, and I also hate the answers. So, but here's what I'm not great creative either, but mine would say, invest in yourself, join manufacturing. Because I think you have to be ready too, right? You need to prepare yourself.
All right. Those are great bumper stickers, and see, we're still better than AI. All right, thank you to our panelists. It has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you. That does it for our Future of Manufacturing Town Hall and what we can do to seize this opportunity of this very dynamic industry. Again, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here with us today, for your insights, for your laughter, for your knowledge. Thank you and your expertise. And a big thank you to you, our audience, for coming in to Cooley Auditorium, spending some time with us here at Milwaukee PBS. And as well, thank you to our viewers at home. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you joining us. And lastly, thank you to Milwaukee Area Technical College for hosting us and hosting this job fair that preceded the event. On behalf of the entire staff at Milwaukee PBS, the crew, and all of our partners at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, I'm Portia Young. Thank you so much for being part of the Future of Manufacturing Town Hall. Have a good night.